now bring you the news from Tokyo. I'm Yuka Otani. In the headlines. In New York City, 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center on Tuesday morning. U.S. President George W. Bush has condemned what he called an apparent terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. And media reports say that an aircraft crashed near the U.S. Defense Department building and the West Wing of the White House was evacuated amid threats of terrorism. Now the main news in detail. In New York City, 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center on Tuesday morning. The crash caused a blaze inside the huge Twin Tower buildings, and black smoke is billowing out from both buildings. Cable News Network reported that one of the planes is believed to have been a Boeing 737 type jet. Reuters is reporting that at least 6 people are dead and 1,000 are injured. In Washington, D.C., officials said that the FBI was investigating reports of a plane hijacking before the crashes. U.S. President George W. Bush has condemned what he called an apparent terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. He pledged the U.S. government will hunt down those responsible. President Bush cut short a visit to Florida to return to Washington. Reuters reported that a Palestinian group had claimed responsibility for crashing 2 planes into the New York World Trade Center on Tuesday morning. Abu Dhabi Television reported it had received a call from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And media reports say that an aircraft crashed near the U.S. Defense Department building and the West Wing of the White House was evacuated amid threats of terrorism. And some other news now. Japan's Agriculture Ministry will ask a British research institute to judge whether Japan has actually had its first case of mad cow disease. On Monday, the ministry said that a dairy cow in Chiba, east of Tokyo, had tested positive for mad cow disease. The ministry on Tuesday convened a panel of experts headed by University of Tokyo professor Takashi Onodera. The panel decided to send samples of the cow's brain and results of tests by Japanese researchers to the British government's Veterinary Laboratories Agency. To prevent a recurrence, the panel also agreed to study in detail where the cow was born and raised and what types of feed it was given. NHK has learned that more than 300 tons of cattle feed that may have been contaminated with mad cow disease were exported from Britain to Japan between 1990 and 1996. A British Agriculture Ministry source told NHK that a total of 330 tons of feed containing the ground meat and bones of sheep, cows and pigs were shipped to Japan until imports were banned in 1996. European countries banned imports of British cattle feed after experts in 1990 pointed out the possibility of mad cow disease spreading through contaminated feed. As a result, exports to non-EU countries surged. As for exports from EU members other than Britain, where cases of mad cow disease have been confirmed, a source with the EU Agriculture Committee says up to 80,000 tons of cattle feed were sent to Japan between 1993 and 2000, mostly from Italy and Denmark. In Britain, ground meat and bones are kept under tight guard as contagious waste until being incinerated at thermal power plants. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party panel on agriculture has demanded that the government protect farmers from damage by rumors about mad cow disease. In an emergency meeting on Tuesday, officials from both ministries in charge of agriculture and health explained the history of the case and how they are dealing with it. The panel demanded that the ministries take proper measures to prevent farmers from being hurt by rumors by providing consumers with information on the safety of beef and other products. Food stores in Japan have begun putting up notices stressing the safety of beef and milk after the country's first suspected case of mad cow disease came to light. A Tokyo-based supermarket chain placed notices in the meat and dairy sections at all 82 of its stores. The notices carry the official view of Japan's Agriculture Ministry and the World Health Organization that there is no risk of infection from eating beef or drinking milk. One shopper who came to buy pork said she had believed domestic cattle were safe and that she wants the government to find out as soon as possible why this happened. Meanwhile, South Korea and Singapore have imposed a temporary suspension on imports of Japanese beef and beef products. South Korea has imported 300 tons of Japanese beef and bones since April. Singapore imports only top-quality expensive beef from Japan, with a trading volume reaching about 5 tons since the start of the year. A typhoon is now skirting the northeastern part of the Pacific coast of Japan. Weather officials warn of continued strong rain. The typhoon passed over Tokyo shortly before noon on Tuesday and was reported to be about 30 kilometers east-southeast of Iwaki City at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. It was moving northeast at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour, with winds of more than 82 kilometers per hour at its center. 5 people have been killed and 3 people are missing. The typhoon has destroyed 67 homes and flooded 38 others. Bullet train services between Tokyo and Nagano, which had been suspended, has now returned to normal, but some bullet train lines in northern Japan remain shut down. Airlines have cancelled 274 flights, mainly in and out of Tokyo's Haneda airport. And now a second powerful typhoon has hit Okinawa, Japan's southernmost prefecture. A Japanese government panel has outlined an interim report on a schedule for structural reforms centering on measures to deal with rising unemployment. The Council on Economic and Fiscal Policies drew up the interim report on Tuesday. The report says Japan's bad loan problem should be settled in 3 years and that securities market reform should be carried out quickly to encourage investment by individual investors. Also listed as urgent are measures to deal with the gap between job seekers and job offers, or so-called employment mismatch. Measures include having universities and graduate schools offer vocational training to ordinary citizens. It also proposes having public and private job agencies cooperate in providing more job information through the internet or other means. The report also says an optical fiber network project should be launched during the current fiscal year. It says legal revisions to promote e-commerce should be studied in the upcoming extraordinary session of Parliament. Based on the report, the government will finalize an official schedule for reforms in late September. And now here is a frequency notice. You're listening to Radio Japan, broadcasting on 7.200, 9.505 and 11.730 MHz in the 41, 31 and 25 meter bands. This transmission is being relayed to the Middle East and North Africa by Moyabe Gabon on 17.755 MHz in the 16 meter band. And now some other news. A major U.S. credit rating agency, Standard & Poor's, says it may review the ratings of Japan's state bonds. S&P announced on Tuesday that it revised downward its projections on Japanese government bonds from the current wording of stable to negative. The agency says that it will maintain the current rating of the bonds at AA+, the second highest of its 21 rating levels. But S&P says that the agency's revised projections suggest the possibility of a future rating review. Explaining the revision, the agency said that if the government is slow in implementing structural reforms amid Japan's worsening economy, Japan would suffer a worsening fiscal situation. Economic ministers from Asia and Europe are soon expected to issue a statement pledging cooperation to launch a new round of global trade talks under the World Trade Organization. The statement will wrap up the Asia-Europe Economic Ministers meeting in Hanoi, Vietnam, that ended on Tuesday. Delegates from 25 countries took part. During the meeting, Japan's Economy and Trade Minister Takeo Hiranuma said the new round of trade talks should be launched in November at the WTO ministerial meeting in Qatar. He said that in order to encourage the participation of developing countries, the new round should deal with a broad agenda, including tariff reductions and common investment rules. Mr. Hiranuma also expressed Japan's support for nurturing industries in developing countries. An NHK correspondent says disagreements over the agenda also exist between industrialized countries, and adjusting their opinions will be the key to starting the new round in November. Japan's defense agency chief Gen Nakatani says his agency will launch a drastic review next week of the country's defense capabilities, including the structure and equipment of the self-defense forces. Speaking at a news conference in Jakarta on Tuesday, Mr. Nakatani said that his agency plans to set up a new study panel to make the review, with an eye toward reviewing the National Defense Program Outline, which is a guideline for the nation's defense capabilities. Mr. Nakatani said that the environment surrounding security is rapidly changing amid recent information-oriented developments. He said Japan needs to start from scratch in considering how to defend the country and maintain regional security. Mr. Nakatani said that he'll also ask the panel to study roles for the self-defense forces in areas other than war, such as fighting terrorism and taking part in disaster relief operations, with an eye toward the new post-Cold War era. Indonesian President Megawati Soekarno Putri says she hopes Japan will serve as a bridge between Indonesia and the government of newly independent East Timor. Ms. Megawati met on Tuesday with Japan's defense agency Nakatani. Mr. Nakatani explained that Japan is considering sending its self-defense forces to join UN peacekeepers in East Timor when the former Indonesian territory achieves full independence next year. Ms. Megawati welcomed the idea and added that she hopes Japan will serve as bridge when Indonesia holds talks with the new government of East Timor over issues such as ensuring the safe return of refugees in West Timor. South Korean President Kim Dae-jung on Tuesday named former Unification Minister Im Dong-won as his special advisor of diplomatic affairs, national security and unification. Mr. Im resigned as minister last Tuesday after Parliament passed a no-confidence motion against him. An NHK correspondent in Seoul says the reappointment of Mr. Im as a presidential aide indicates that President Kim expects him to play a key role in upcoming talks with North Korea. Senior officials from the two Koreas will begin a 4-day meeting in Seoul on Saturday, the first such meeting since inter-Korean dialogue was cancelled in March by Pyongyang. And let's take a look at the top stories at this hour once again. In New York City, 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center on Tuesday morning. The crash caused a blaze inside the huge Twin Tower buildings, and black smoke is billowing out from both buildings. Cable news network reported that one of the planes is believed to have been a Boeing 737 type jet. Reuters is reporting that at least 6 people are dead and 1,000 are injured. In Washington, D.C., officials said that the FBI was investigating reports of a plane hijacking before the crashes. U.S. President George W. Bush has condemned what he called an apparent terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. He pledged that the U.S. government will hunt down those responsible. President Bush cut short a visit to Florida to return to Washington. Reuters reported that a Palestinian group had claimed responsibility for crashing 2 planes into the New York World Trade Center on Tuesday morning. Abu Dhabi television reported it had received a call from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And media reports say that an aircraft crashed near the U.S. Defense Department building and the West Wing of the White House was evacuated amid threats of terrorism. And that's the news from Radio Japan. I'm Yuka Otani in Tokyo. Next follows a weekday magazine program, Japan and the World, 44 minutes, so please stay tuned.